that was the commerce in those communities. Tragic. On the other side, we have the corporations making billions of dollars on opioids. You know, and what, I mean, there's all kinds of dead people. So what's the compensatory tool? Find them, sue them. And to the credit of Letitia James here, State Attorney General, she, among others, but her was a significant award to the state for manufacturers of opioids.
Yes.
And I think she should be congratulated for that.
Yes. I was at her celebration
Oh, good.
on Tuesday. Let me ask you a question. So, dealing with how January 6th
Yeah.
and how the world sees us, how can we demote democracy when it seems like our democracy is failing?
Now, I'd answer that in two ways. One, I'm always interested to hear people say, well, we shouldn't be involved overseas because we have all these problems. Well, that's nonsense. If you lose control of the Mediterranean basin, you will be eating straw in this country in about 5 years. Just a fact of life. Pax Americana has kept us all from being blown up in the nuclear age since 1945, 6, 7, 8. The American participation in the Berlin airlift, which airlifted food into a blockaded Berlin, taking on the Soviets at the time, was an act of great bravery and courage, and the result is that we've been able, with all our problems, to continue to function here. If the Americans do not do what they're supposed to do, which is to provide world stability, and they're seen as the last great hope by most of the world, there will be a disaster.
So are we still being seen as the
Well,
last?
that's the problem.
That's the question.
That's the January 6th issue.
That's
What
the
January
question.
6th did was it undermined that faith. What Donald Trump did by undermining NATO was create the seeds for the Ukraine war we have today. Why? Because he made it appear the Americans were weak. And the Americans said NATO was weak, and the Russians have been trying to get rid of NATO since it was created.
Right.
So this is a serious set of world problems. Now, you can't ask people who don't think about it to really start thinking about this stuff. But our future and the future of the people who want to have what our generations have had, for better or worse, whether black or white, relies to a good extent on the ability of the American nation to defend itself, not to destroy people internally.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chinese are the real threat coming up. And Henry Kissinger, who's certainly no slouch in foreign policy by any measure, that's a joke, but he predicted that we were as close to a war with China several years ago as we're going to be, and it could happen again. So that this is serious.
Yes. Hey, do you think 50 to 75 years from now we'll call ourselves a democracy in the United States?
Nothing is forever, and democracy is not a growth product. But the attacks on ethnic groups overall are an indication that there is deep-rooted problems within the democracy. Because ethnic violence, I mean, Hannah Arendt and others have written more extensively on it and should be read. But the attacks on Jews, the attacks and the permissibility of it, the beating of Asians and the permissibility of it, are indications of something rotten underneath it. And when you can have that kind of behavior and presume it's okay, it tells you that aggrieved communities are taking out their anger and their economic their rage about economic displacement on others who frankly may not deserve it.
They say hurt people hurt people.
That's the
So,
question.
in summary, what would you advise the United States government to do to safeguard our democracy?
Well, we have to go back to look. A lot of people didn't like what Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the late U.S. Senator from New York, and ambassador and scholar and the rest had to say, but we need to begin to give people the ability to stabilize their communities as a start. Democracy begins at home. It's like charity. We've got to restore, in some fashion, civic organizations. We're in a black community. Black communities were over-organized. A great book years ago written called Access to Power. Access to power isn't power. But black communities were historically very over-organized. All kinds of groups functioning all the time. It's a way to create social networks and to seek power. Now those groups are dying. If we look at voluntary groups in the non-black community, Masons, Kiwanans, Lions, Oddfellows, Eastern Star, Dimly, all these things, and even churches are dying. This was once the most religious country in the world, according to scholars, and it's not that way anymore. So the basic things that keep this society going are in deep trouble and are changing rapidly. We have a society that's much more fragmented. If I were the President of the United States or I were in government, I want to unify people. And not about politics, but about providing for human need. Because those service organizations weren't about politics. But what they did provide was a lesson in civic culture. And it was the place where people could argue without wanting to kill each other. Argue in the forensic sense. Well, I don't agree with you, but there are other things we do agree on. What we have now is an entirely polarized society, where people don't agree on much, and they pillory people based upon ethnic identification, racial identification, or political identification. That's not a good recipe for success.
This is probably my last question.
Sure.
When Obama was president,
Sure.
did you feel that the United States was healing, that we have a black president now at that time, and that was good for America and we can move on?
I thought it was very good for America.
Well, what happened?
I can't answer that. I think Barack Obama said it best, and he really did. He said that he was 10 years too early, and I think he was.
Yeah.
I think he was. But I think the fact that we can elect a black president speaks volumes. I'm still a believer in the shining city on the hill. I think that with all its problems, the country's adapted more quickly than most other places in the world to its problems, and tries sometimes with great failure and sometimes with great success to do something about it. Pell Grants are a great success, okay? The National Defense Student Loan Act, before it became taken over by the corporations to make money, was a great success. It put people through college, gave them opportunity. I think we've got to get back to the business of providing real opportunity without punishment.
Yes.
And if we don't do that, we're going to have a society that fractures. It's just that simple.
Yes. Well, Hank, it's really a pleasure,
Thank
and
you.
I'm so excited that
Thank you
you
very much.
came
Well, of course.
to speak to us. And
I'm
you
very
have
happy
been
to
a
be here.
friend for over 20 years,
That's true.
and we love you. I love you.
That's very sweet of you.
And I thank you.
Thank you.